Max, I'm really excited to share this episode with you.
Are you? I had a really great time listening to this episode. Although I didn't get to join the conversation, I was the first person to listen to it. Very lucky. So, Zach, give me a little intro about what we're getting into.
Yeah, definitely. Well, in this episode, I sat down with Travis Slisher and discussed leadership skills every engineer should develop, from communication and accountability to building strong teams and empowering others. Drawing from his own leadership journey, Travis shared the lessons he's learned really leading teams and developing future leaders. In engineering, technical expertise often earns you a management role, but as we all know, great leadership is what builds trust, strengthens teams, and really drives long-term success.
Really did have, it was actually a journey. I mean, the story was really cool. So part of this discussion I really appreciate is that you and I have different backgrounds with management word, right? I've always been on the side that thinks management are for those too old to keep up with the technical engineering. When I've been in positions where I need to check people's time cards, it is the least exciting, rewarding activity, truly requiring negative attention. But Travis makes a very compelling point discussing the role of leaders in the firm. Not the person that tells you what project you get next, but the person of any age or any position in the company that pushes everyone to be the best version of themselves they can.
Probably one of the biggest takeaways from this conversation is that leadership isn't about being the smartest engineer in the room. It's about helping other people become better engineers or really bettering themselves. Whether your strengths are technical design, project management, client relationships, or business development, those skills will take you far, but the ability to develop other people is what separates managers from leaders. Travis shares a lot of practical wisdom in this episode, and I think you'll find something that challenges the way you think about leadership.
Let's listen to it.
The Structural Engineering Podcast.
Travis, welcome to the Structural Engineering Podcast. Super excited to talk to you today about leadership. Would you start off with just an intro of yourself?
Certainly. Yeah, my name's Travis Slisher, and I work with Zach at PEC. Been in the construction industry for 20-some years at this point. And full disclaimer and spoiler alert, whatever you call those, there may be some cursing in this episode.
Hell yeah. How many push-ups do you think you could do?
27.
Perfect. All right. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Thank you. How did leadership become really a thought in your mind? Where did that start and what was your journey?
You know, I started my career in the plumbing and mechanical industry, and I started managing people much older than me in my early 20s. And I focused strictly on production. I didn't focus on the value of people and building relationships. I really just wanted to be profitable. And I learned quickly that I wasn't respecting people and they didn't respect me, which made it very obvious that I needed to focus on how to be a better manager. Didn't know how to do that. And really the story is that got married at 27, was in project management and leading organizations at this stage in my career. My wife and I had about 3 years of marriage before our daughter was born. And when our daughter was born, the spotlight really started to shine on me for the lack of leadership ability. And leadership was really transferred in both how I showed up in my marriage and how I showed up in my career. And so the struggles that I was having in our marriage only was reflective of how poorly I was leading at work as well. So I wouldn't say I really understood the concept of leadership until I started to struggle in marriage, and then reached out to get some guidance through therapists and learning and growing on how to communicate better. And once I saw that I could improve in my marriage and do a better job of connecting with my wife and meeting her needs, I recognized that there was a need for that in business.
That makes sense. What would you say is the way you differentiate management and leadership?
I think management is more task-based delegation. You manage to an outcome. Leadership really involves a practice of caring for the entirety of the person. Who am I? If I'm leading someone, I'm responsible more for their well-being. If you're managing someone, you're just managing again to outcomes. And as anybody that has a direct report, you're responsible to lead. You're responsible for that person's well-being. We spend a third of our waking adult life in our work. And if you have that much influence on someone, you should really do your best to care for them and make their experience as good as rewarding and as purposeful as possible.
Certainly. So when you think about great leaders you've worked with, what qualities immediately stand out to you?
Well, humility is a huge part of that. You can't be a good leader if you already know everything. There's no way to maintain trust or relationships if if you don't embody humility, and that goes in hand with being curious. You know, you can be humble, but you can just stay in the shadows. But a good leader is one that'll be curious about their teammates and their clients and the people they interact with on a daily basis. If you don't show interest, does that show care? And so I think the two things that I value the most, and I've seen effective from the managers the leaders that I've worked for, is that humility and the curiosity, two most important values. There's a whole lot more that goes into it than just those two things. But if you only focus on those two things, I think that those are really effective. Patrick Lencioni is an author, wrote many different business fables. And one of his books is called The Ideal Team Player. And he describes the ideal team player, and I think this works both ways, from a leadership perspective and from a direct report perspective, as three characteristics: humble, hungry, smart. And that's gold.
Right.
Be humble, right? You don't know it all. You never will. Doesn't matter what stage of your career you're in. Be hungry to learn more. Be curious, ask questions, do your best to grow, and grow your intelligence. Be smart. You ask questions to gain knowledge, and all three of those things I've seen to be very effective.
Yeah, I really like that, and I think you can see that with the people that you surround yourself that are great leaders, and especially within businesses. I think you can see those three really standing out.
Certainly.
So a question we get a lot, or advice we get asked, is a lot of engineers are promoted because of their technical strengths.
Mm-hmm.
Truly, what is the biggest leadership gap that you see when this happens?
Well, that leadership gap doesn't just apply to engineering. That is an issue across all industries, that people are promoted, and oftentimes they're promoted without the skill set for their next position. And that crux of career is the most challenging dynamic in anyone's career, from my experience. To go from strong technical knowledge, and in my case, this was installing plumbing and mechanical products, to then leading and managing people, it's a completely different mindset. And when you know you're competent in that, clearly you can execute and usually expand that knowledge and share it with others. But that is task management 101. When you are a technical expert and you're able to knock out projects, that's management. Like we talked about earlier, the step into leadership is totally different. And so the question is, what advice?
Well, yeah, what's the biggest leadership gap you see when this happens?
The leadership gap. Approaching it in the same way as technical problems. When people know, this is how I was successful in that role, and so I'm going to apply that to the same things of managing people. Rarely is that successful. People are not problems to be solved. They're not equations. They're not going to be found in the code book about this is how you're going to go manage it. That doesn't exist. It's a completely new skill set on how to approach that. So I that's the biggest gap people have is using that same skill. The toolbox that got you to that point in your career where you were technically successful is not the same toolkit that will make you successful as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't recall the author, but a great book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There.
Oh yeah. I've heard about that one.
And I found that to be eye-opening, and something you have to change your mentality and what you're doing when you go from producing the work to managing, leading truly the people that are doing the work. And it's actually something I found a challenge as I changed in my career. Is I was a doer, and then I became a leader or manager of doers, and I try to do both at the same time, which was the quickest way I could find to burn myself out.
Yeah.
And my family and everyone around me, I was just working so much to do that, and I didn't recognize my value is only given. I thought my value was that I was doing and producing, but no longer in that leadership role, or is that what you're directly doing?
Yeah.
But I think so many engineers find that to be where they see their value within their company.
Well, you're hitting on a really important mindset shift, which is incredibly difficult. I am a doer and I produce. And when you then become a leader, you don't produce in the same way. along these same lines, you have that extrinsic motivation. You're able to say, okay, I put these drawings together. I met that deadline, that permit submission, whatever it may be. Those validating points don't occur when you then start to manage people if you're looking for them that way. It's much more intrinsically motivated. How did I support that person? Did I show up and actually mentor them in the way that they see fit to be mentored? So that mindset shift that you alluded to about being a doer and moving down burnout, everyone struggles with that. You're not alone when you go through that process because it is an incredibly challenging transition. So great point bringing that up.
Now, asking to be a little vulnerable here, was there a leadership failure or mistake early in your career that changed how you're leading today?
I mean, there's no one. There's probably hundreds that I can point to. The one that comes to front of mind right now is going back to that young superintendent on the job site that was managing a crew of 6 or 8 team members, all of them older than me, much more experienced than me, maybe not as driven as me. That's why I was in the superintendent seat. But the way that I approached those team members was we needed to meet deadlines. Like I said, I was only focused on production, not on the people. And I made a statement to that group after us missing some installation deadlines. We weren't meeting the demands of the contractor. And I did the huddle up in the morning, usually the flex and stretch. And I said, all right, I need to talk to you all. I need every one of you to recognize that we're behind schedule. It's all because of your production. And if you guys aren't able to keep up on this project, I'll find somebody that is.
Wow.
Wow's right. What an asshole. What an asshole, right? To not look at the human element and not to lead with curiosity, not leading with humility and saying, I may have been the one that got us here. How can we work together to solve this problem? And so that failure will forever be part of my story. Now I can look back at it as a learning and turning point. For many years, I look back at it with shame and a little bit of humility too.
Yeah, because if you're finding out what actually is the challenge, right, then you can actually assist in that rather than just pushing them to go harder.
Well, you can't make it the crew's issue. You can't make it your direct report's issue saying that you're not productive, right? It starts with, did I really make the expectations clear? Was I the one that established the schedule, or did I even support this team with going back to our general contractor and saying this isn't a realistic deadline, or it is, and I didn't convey the team and provide them with the right support? So otherwise, to just push them harder isn't going to be successful. It's only going to be more asshole.
Yeah. Do you think in the world of AEC that leadership is often an undervalued trait, or something that's a skill that's not being developed as much as you might think, would bring more value if it were to be?
So I'm hearing 2 questions. Is it an undervalued skill, and is it maybe not developed? Is that?
Yeah.
It is a 2-part question because it's valued. People will gravitate to what they value. If they see that, boy, I really enjoy working for Jane over Zach,
right?
Because Zach's no fun to work for. That's leadership.
Yeah,
it's naturally occurring. So is it valued? Isn't necessarily something I can answer. Everyone will place value on it, and they'll naturally gravitate towards someone that they felt led by. Is it something that gets the right resources, the right focus, the right level of investment? I think as an industry as a whole, no.
Yeah.
There's plenty of firms that do it well. There's individuals that do it well that can focus on it. But to do it deliberately and say this is something that we value, and we as a firm agree to put resources, time, energy, money, whatever those resources are behind it, should happen more consistently. Because again, we spend a third of our waking adult life in our work. And so if you don't have strong leadership, the chances that you're going to feel like your work really matters and it's going to be rewarding are less.
Yeah. How do you think leadership impacts that project's success? I mean, maybe it ties a little bit to what you just mentioned with your previous experience, but and even beyond the technical design.
Well, defining success is an important standard here. Did we deliver the project on time? Did we deliver the project on budget? it may not affect it. There's many examples where there wasn't strong leadership and there was maybe even an adversarial team environment that delivered a successful project, in quotes here. But to say that, did we deliver a rewarding project that really made an impact on community, that people felt really brought value to their life and was a good investment of their time? Leadership has an immense example. Leaders go first. Simon Sinek says leaders eat last. If you don't set the example, if you don't really show the team what success looks like from a client perspective, from a community perspective, from a discipline and team perspective, what do you expect the outcome to be?
Yeah.
Whatever any individual defines it as success. And that may be sending the permit set in and then going home and never thinking about the project again. I don't know that that's successful. The success comes when the client, the end user says, wow, you really met the goals, and this building, this structure, this is making a difference in our community in a way that's really, really meaningful. So where's that going to come from if not leadership?
Yeah. So from engineers that are listening that are both young and, have been developed into their career, where do you think they should start in their leadership journey? Where should, is it a book, a different mindset of how they need to think about being a leader?
Well, there's no right spot for anyone. The trick is just starting. I can relate to that question because earlier when I was going through that process with my wife and learning about therapy and leadership styles, I figured if I read every leadership book, I would be proficient. I would at that point have arrived at sound leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And after probably 5 years of reading and exhausting myself and saying, I got to grow and I got to get better, I recognize that they're all really good tools. They're all really good resources. And it's just the chapter and the season that we're in.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of us was in that starting point in our career where we didn't have the leadership skills that we needed to excel. We didn't have the technical knowledge. So it's just starting. Find that mentor. Ask somebody else that they admire. I really like the way that you lead. What are some of the things that influenced you? So if you're asking me that, what are some of the things that influenced me? Mentioned some of the books by Patrick Lencioni, The Ideal Team Player, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, great books to start with.
Yeah.
My recommendation and where I found that I was more successful is when you start with your internal evaluation. Am I showing up to be the leader that I want to be? And how can I be the leader that I'd never had? And that starts with a real emotional work of evaluating how we show up in the most difficult situations. That's probably the best evaluation, is that it's all fine when it's projects on schedule and we're meeting client demands and we deliver a project. There probably isn't conflict. There probably isn't a huge need to introspect. But where did the project go off the rails? When did I not deliver or the team not deliver? So, all this to say, the start is introspection.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think I had a similar journey in that standpoint of, I'll read every book I can find, get my hands on. I'll learn everything, and that's it, because from an engineering standpoint, so much of what we do, the first principles and how we lay out the way we do things is almost at ones and zeros,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's there's not a lot of gray to it, although there is some in structural engineering, but you read the book and you design it. Right. And I think as you're mentioning, that is not the world of leadership.
No. But as we've been trained through our education, through studying for the exams and being that level up professional, that's where you find the answers. So to change your mindset is a really difficult challenge. So introspecting on, okay, now that I have this opportunity to grow my leadership ability,
right,
what kind of leader do I want to be? You probably don't want to be the guy that says, if you can't do the job, I'll find somebody who will. That's not recommended.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I always thought you needed a position to be a leader within your company. And I've come to learn that is not what a leader is and what that means. And I think early in my career, I thought, you became a leader the longer you've been in your career, and that meant you're in a higher position. But really, from day one, you can work on your leadership and show up. Yeah. I think that's such a big part of leadership.
We define leadership a little bit at the beginning around humility and curiosity. Can you show up with that at any level of your career?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so even as an entry-level person, willing to embody those, that's embodying leadership.
What type of development or resources do you think engineers could look for from the firms they're working for? What is like a common question that they could ask, or resources that would be available that their firm may support them?
Yeah. Well, again, getting curious and asking the question about what are our professional development opportunities? Is it all around technical only? Right? We may provide opportunities to get your PE license, but beyond that, you won't probably be supported if you don't ask the questions. You're in control of your career. No one's going to come to you. Well, I shouldn't say no one. Rarely do people come to you and say, I really want to put you in this program. You may get that, but that's 1 in 10, not everyone. So being curious to say, I really want to grow. I want to get better. And if you're listening to this podcast, clearly you're already trying to grow and get better. So take that same attitude to work and say, direct supervisor, someone even farther up the chain, can you share what we do to develop leaders here? What is our professional development plan, and how can I engage in that and really increase my skill set? When people in management hear you say that you want to grow and get better, that's when they are willing to start investing in you, not the other way around where you're waiting for someone to come and tell you that. You may know your value,
Right.
but at some point you have to be willing to ask for it as well.
Yeah. What about from a cultural standpoint? If you're working at your firm and either really enjoy the culture, how can you take your leadership or develop your leadership into, supporting that?
Mhm.
Or the other way, you're not enjoying the culture of your firm. How, as a young leader or a leader of any sort, step in to help that?
It's a nuanced answer. Culture exists. It's not what's written on the wall. It's not values. It's not the mission or purpose. Culture exists in how people show up every day. Culture exists in what they tolerate and what they celebrate. So first question is, if there is a culture that's outlined and written down, is it accurate? If you feel like that's true to the firm and you feel like there's some discrepancies, well, there's your first tools to go utilize those with, again, your direct manager, your other team members around you, and if it, use that value to say, I've got a question. I see a discrepancy, and this value is kind of where I'm trying to explore that. So you may have that framework already in place to be able to make a change, and you have the voice, you have the ability to make a change. Not like a bull in a china shop where you come in and just destroy things and say, I want my way. It's that curiosity and the approach and saying, I see what's published, and I might see some things that are challenging that. If you don't have that framework, it becomes a little more challenging because it's very much a conversation around opinions. And that's okay. That is just one opportunity to say, well, I don't see our operating agreements. How do we treat one another? How we show up every day? And getting curious about, well, how can we establish values and how can we use those? And most likely, if you think about it for a little while, you'll know this is probably the 3 or 4 values that I see show up every day, whether that's integrity because people come in at 7 and stay till 5 and they really value hard work. Well, that may be a value. And so I think using those tools that are provided to you to help have thoughtful conversations around change and not just staying silent and suffering, which is so often what younger staff can do in their careers, just wait it out. And then you had mentioned it earlier, contributes to burnout, especially with transitions.
Yeah. How do you fit communication into that? How would you suggest to engineers to communicate? And if they're, I'm just thinking many years ago of sitting there and seeing things or thinking about things and being like, man, I wish I had more of a voice in this. And now recognizing that I really did have a voice, but maybe I just didn't use it.
It's a great observation from your past experiences. We talked about opinions a little bit in that description. Through, if you document something once or you see a behavior once, it's just a difference of opinions, different of perspective. If you see the same behavior happen a second time, well, there's a pattern developing. So you might just keep your eyes open. And when you see something or similar a third time, it's really irrefutable. So communicating on that is, especially around your experience, being honest and say, hey, I want to speak with you about an experience I've had. this happened, and then this happened, and this happened. This led me to feel this way, whether that was valued or I don't feel that my voice matters or whatever you are truly feeling. Having a really good example and not coming at it from a threatening way, just coming at it from a very factual, like, this is what I'd like in my career. It's okay to advocate for your needs. It's a really important just to understand those boundaries. And if you're doing that at that level, it only helps you grow into that leadership role. So I think it's be really mindful about your observations, find the patterns, and then find a really compassionate and empathic way to bring up the conversation.
Yeah.
That make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I like that. So flipping it to the leader here, more mindset, I'm curious from the other side of it, what is your suggestions to leaders that need to handle a difficult conversation or performance issues with their team? How do they lead a solution?
Oh, I love this question because I've got a solution. One of the things that I've learned in my time managing people is that most often it's my issue when it came to underperformance. Almost always it started with me and not really giving clear expectations. And so I live by a philosophy called the 3 C's. The first, it's 4 C's, but it's 3 steps. So a little confusing on that front. But when you are managing people, when you are leading people, ideally, you're very mindful about who they are, how they receive feedback, how they interact. But no matter what, it is your responsibility to get extremely clear and concise about your expectations. That's step 1, clear and concise. When you have that clarity and you can say, okay, here's my deliverable, here's the time frame, here's exactly what I would like to see the outcome look like. What do you need to be able to achieve that? And you give that direct report the exact same opportunity to come back to that, the leader, with clear and concise. Okay, well, I need review time at this time next week. I need some input on these areas that I don't feel really strong in about how I go about this design or this execution. And at that point, when both individuals have conveyed their clear and concise expectations, you're off and running. Go execute. There shouldn't need to be a whole lot of check-in unless it was conveyed. Hey, check in me on 2 or 3 days because I want to make sure I'm on track and I'm not going off. Okay, great. But if that wasn't conveyed, I'm going to get to the deadline. So clear and concise is the number 1 rule that I like to live by in this 3-step process. Let's say you get to that deliverable and expectations weren't met for one reason or another. Well, I'm going to go back and revisit. Was there a miscommunication? Where did the clear and concise break down? It may have been on me. I want to make sure that it wasn't on me. And if we go through it and we find, okay, yep, I did not get you that expectation about I was in a hurry. I just told you this was the outcome. I could see where that happened. Well, that's that humility piece that we talked about. If you determine clear and concise was absolutely executed and it was underperformance, well, then we have a competency concern. So that's the second C. How do we get this individual trained, whether it was time management they struggled with, whether it was truly technical ability? How do they get trained up, get them the resources so that way this doesn't become an issue again? Okay, so then we're back to the races. We're going to deliver on the next one. Well, let's say that we did clear and concise. We got really clear on the next expectation. We got them the training. They're ready to go. We've seen them perform, and we get to the next deadline, and we don't necessarily deliver yet again. The last C, the final one for me, is care. Do you really care to perform this duty? Maybe they're not passionate about this project, and we didn't have that conversation from the get-go. It's probably important to ask that question. Maybe they really just aren't in the right seat, or they haven't been feeling value at the firm. Those are good questions as well. What leads to them not caring? But I never want to get to have to ask to the point of actually questioning care with any of my direct reports. So those 3 C's are what I've found so successful in managing direct report relationships. And it creates a 2-way dialogue about what success looks like.
Yeah, it really invites it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think a lot of expectations are just live in our heads that we put on to other people?
Yeah, I really want everyone to read my mind.
Yeah.
And if they did that, then we'd be good.
It's really frustrating they don't.
Yeah, I'm gonna invent that with a walking screen saying, here's what I'm actually thinking, not what I'm saying. Yeah, we under-communicate in so many scenarios. And that comes from, email fatigue and conversation fatigue. But as a leader, you have to prioritize your direct reports. Otherwise, the outcome will not be as you expected.
Yeah. To the same extent, to some level, do you think, You think the world is micromanaged or undermanaged?
Too general to say. I don't know that I could say that they're one or the other.
And where I'm
It's
thinking,
more the question. It's for me. The answer is much more along the lines that expectations aren't clearly conveyed.
Yeah.
The number one issue is that it may not be micromanagement, but clarity. I'm going to take that back. Managing outcomes is not micromanagement. Clear and concise expectations is exactly what is expected of a manager, of a leader. So being afraid to do that and calling it micromanagement is a cultural issue, is a hierarchy and power issue. But there is no problem with being clear and concise when you come from a place of care. Does that answer the question?
yeah, absolutely. I've always, someone's told me before that we don't live in a world necessarily that is micromanaged, but it's actually undermanaged.
Mhm.
And what micromanagers are truly just assholes. And I've thought about that a lot throughout my career,
Yeah.
and often find some truth in that, and find it so intriguing.
It feels like I should be wearing a trucker's hat with asshole on it because I've lived that life at this point. So we'll work on that for Christmas. But I agree. I agree with that sentiment. Yeah, it is disguised as, when you're an asshole, it's a lack of introspection. It's a lack of humility. It's a lack of care. It's a lack of curiosity. And so all those things contribute to not being clear. So micromanagement probably is more of a fallacy than it is an issue.
Yeah. Okay. I want to ask a question about high stakes
Mm.
projects. A lot of our listeners are engineers. They're working on projects day in and day out. So engineering projects often have tight schedules and real consequences if something goes wrong. How does a leader show up in high pressure situations?
As a leader, making or missing a deliverable should never be a surprise, because you should be in communication with your team and you should know. And then first and foremost, communicating that with your clients that we've undercalculated, we've missed, we ran into an issue. And so those are going to be really step one to make sure that, okay, did I do my part? And how do I mitigate this with the client? That's outward facing. Inward facing is much like we talked about my style. It's not to come in and blame and find the issue. It's to say, what are the resources we need to get to the finish line? What are the barriers? How do I remove the barriers? And how do I support getting this project across the finish line? And knowing that you can't sacrifice the quality for speed in that moment, that you may have to be the one that comes to the table with your tail tucked between your legs and say, we missed on this deliverable. That's that humility piece again. When you're willing to do that for your team and stand up and say, all right, we didn't do this. I'm going to take it because it's my responsibility. I may not have checked in enough. I may not have conveyed clear and concise expectations. So be the owner of that deliverable. Be upfront and honest with your client, and be there to support your team. That isn't where it ends. You can't just do that over and over again. Then the root cause analysis comes in. Okay, let's do the debrief. Let's sit down and talk about, how do we get here? What were the things that we all have responsibility on, making sure that this doesn't happen again? Because that lessons learned conversation may be the hardest one. And it may be the hardest one for the leader, where they hear from the team, you missed 2 or 3 of our requests to review this, so we missed the deadline. That may not be the case. Could be the other way around. You didn't deliver this to the point where I could see the QC, and that took me much longer because it was a larger set. So that debrief, that discussion, the dialogue, not the debate, not the fact-finding mission, not the finger pointing, is incredibly important once you've met the deadline.
I also think of, from specifically structural engineering, like the life safety aspect of what we do, right?
Yeah.
Humanity goes into buildings for the most part and don't think about, is this going to collapse on me? They go in, they feel safe, and they don't think about that. And I think so much of that plays with people doing the right thing in those situations with high pressure, of showing up and saying, hey, we're not going to make it, rather than maybe sending bad drawings or, some horrible, unethical things. I think when you have that strong leader in those situations, it helps relieve even that stress of, I know we're going to do the right thing, and it might be hard, or we might get pushed, might have to push things, we might have consequences to it, but that leader is going to show up and make sure that the right things are going to happen, and promote that.
You bring up such an important mindset around your responsibility as a leader, is that it is another human being on the other end of this interaction, no matter what you do. And it could be life-changing, life-altering, life-ending. And so having that lens that it's not just a deliverable is really critical. And that isn't just from the leadership side. That's from every team member, that what we do is incredibly important every single day. And slowing down 24 hours, 48 hours to have a building that stands for 50 years is far more important.
Often trust plays a big role between a leader and their team, an engineering team. What do you think are the right steps to take to really grow that trust?
Well, can you grow trust without knowing the other person that you're working with?
It's a great question. Probably most of the time, no. Yeah, blind trust is probably a little dangerous.
Yeah. So growing trust is difficult because everyone views it differently. The definition of trust for me to use is probably different. The definition of trust within teams is different than the trust that I have in my marriage. So if people come to work expecting the same level of trust that they have in their relationships, will they find that? Maybe not. So I agree with your statement. It's incredibly important to have trust within your project team, specifically with your discipline, and cross-discipline and beyond to external firms and architects. And it's probably not focused on enough to deliver successful projects. How do you build trust? Take an interest. Start with a level of care. Ask questions like, how do you feel valued? How do you feel rewarded? How do you feel recognized? Many, many people don't like the public praise. And if that's your style of building trust, by say, Zach, you did a great job last week in front of the entire team during a meeting, and that makes you blush and turn around, well, read the room and say, probably something I need to send an email or write a card and say, man, I'm really proud of how you showed up for that client. So trust comes in so many forms that it's so individualized that if you don't start with a level of care for the people that are around you, it's likely going to fall flat. And one of my most favorite quotes around trust is that it's built over hundreds and thousands of interactions, but broke in a single second. So take those words carefully, that you're really approaching relationships with care.
That's powerful. In the same sense of building trust, how do you think good leaders motivate teams, especially during difficult times?
I don't know that it's the responsibility of a leader to motivate. I think that this kind of comes back to micromanagement. Motivation is important, no question. You want people to be engaged in their work and want to put out their best work, but it doesn't start from, okay, we're up against a deadline and I'm going to motivate this team to go execute. It starts in the everyday interactions of again, building trust and saying that I care about them and showing that individual how they made a difference on a daily basis. So when the time comes that it's high stakes, they know that you've got their back. If you just try to do it in high stress situations, it's going to feel pressure. It's going to feel like, it's going to feel like a pressure cooker, and it's going to feel like a forced deadline. But if you create that over many, many interactions, constantly reinforcing, I see you, you did a good job, I trust you, we're building it, you're going to get really solid performance when it's high stakes. If you don't invest in a team during the normal times and you step in and, okay, folks, it's high stakes. We got to get this done. I need you all to come to the table and here's your responsibility and yours and yours and yours. Well, there's a pressure to perform, likely leading to maybe not the best work. And so motivation doesn't come in the form of one interaction and we're going to get to this deadline. It comes from many, many interactions and knowing your people and telling them how much they matter.
Man, I like that a lot. What advice would you give an engineer who wants to become a leader but doesn't currently have that title?
Well, it starts with the question, why do you want to be a leader? Leadership isn't about titles. Leadership is about showing up. Leadership is about focusing on people over profit. Leadership is about understanding it comes down to relationships before product. So if you desire a promotion, if you desire decision-making ability, why? What's the change you want to influence? What's the responsibility or the recognition you're searching for? That's the wrong motivation. If you want to do it to support the quality of a product, the quality of a team, the work-life balance, those all are sound motivations. So why are you motivated to grow and gain that title is the most important question people should ask themselves at every career stage. And the answer may be that I don't really want to lead, but I don't like where I'm at right now. Well, maybe that's much more about, is my voice valued? Do I feel heard? Do I feel valued and seen here? And those are important questions before you make that transition, because without knowing, this is back to external validation to internal validation, or intrinsic and I don't know the words there. If you don't know how you feel rewarded internally, those promotions will ring hollow and you'll get burned out again, and you won't have the balance because you're still searching for something to fill that void.
What do you think someone should do if they go to who they think is a leader with a challenge they're having and they're not being heard, or they don't feel heard, or there's, it doesn't go well?
Sure.
What do you think that next step looks like?
Yeah. Happens all the time. Happens all the time when you convey a message and that lands on deaf ears, or it was the wrong time to convey it. I think resiliency is really important. And the first time you try, you might, if it doesn't land and you don't see results, that's the opportunity to go back and try again. All right. They might not have heard me. They might not have, who knows what they had on their plate that day. They could have very well been dealing with a bigger problem that they just couldn't turn their attention to. So was it a deliberate focus? Here's my intent. I want to sit down with you and I want to go through a problem that I'm experiencing, and I really need your attention on it. So often, especially early in my career, I would just barge in and say, here's what I have on my plate, and I'm the only thing that matters right now, but I had no idea what's happening on the other side of the table. So that awareness of where are they at, have I stated my intent? If it's happened once and we didn't get anywhere, well, now I need to reframe my thinking. How do I approach this person? How do they want to hear it? And you try again, you schedule that time, you schedule that meeting. Maybe it's not in the office. Maybe it's, hey, can I get a cup of coffee with you? Because I think it's too many distractions in the office, whatever it may be. And if you do that yet a second time and you feel like it's unheard, unseen, I think the third time it's really important that you give it another try. And sometimes it's important to elevate to the next level at that point. You may need to say, I just don't know that I'm getting across. And it may not be that you get their supervisor. It may be someone else that has a good relationship or was a mentor to them. And they understand how they communicate. Half of those challenges come from different styles of communication and receiving feedback. So it can't be a one and done. Mm-hmm. It's got to be a multi-tiered approach. You got to have resilience. And sometimes you need outside help. You need some other coaching and some other mentors to step in and help you with that conversation. But you really shouldn't make a judgment about what that experience was until you've given it that third shot.
Yeah.
At that point, if you've tried 3 times and you're still not hearing from the folks about making change, then you may not be in the right seat. Doesn't matter. It may not be the right firm.
Who might be those external people you might reach out to? Friends, family, mentors, what might that look like?
Well, it's who's ever within your circle of trust. Yeah. I think those are all great resources, depending on the situation. You don't want to bring your mom to work and say, Zach is really bossing me around and I don't appreciate the way he talks to me. Probably not recommended. But that other coworker in the firm that has a really good relationship with Zach, that you see them communicating well and they get along, you may have that conversation with Sarah and say, hey, Sarah, can you give me a little advice on how to communicate with Zach? I could really, I know you guys are well connected, but certainly running by conversations with your partner or your parents or your friends to where you can emotionally process and not bring that to work and bring that to the conversation, critical.
Yeah.
Super critical that you don't show up with all that frustration or anger or rejected feeling. There's so much that goes. And if you don't do that with somebody else, likely not going to be heard in the way that you want to. So great question on how to process externally. Mm. And all those are good resources as long as they're not just completely enabling. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you should go do that. You demand that raise. You deserve it. You may, but being objective about your sounding board is really important too.
So within the engineering industry, what leadership skill, single leadership skill, do you think the industry needs more of right now?
You know, the change in our tech is going to affect a lot of people. The growth of AI in our industry will make waves. I don't know what those will look like, but human connection becomes more important than ever. In a generation that has grown up on social media and communities that feel more disconnected, more divided in some scenarios, empathy is the number one thing that comes to mind. To manage people without empathy is likely ineffective. And I love this definition of empathy from Brene Brown. She talks about the difference between sympathy and empathy is, you know, you have this deep hole and you have a friend that's down in this deep hole, this challenge in life they're dealing with. And when you see that friend and you're acting with sympathy, you kind of walk up to the edge of the hole and look down in and, you know, say, oh, it looks really dark down there and that it looks like it sucks. It looks tough. And that's not helpful. That's not helping that person feel seen or connected, right? That's kind of that sympathy of like, oh, I see you're in a tough spot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that makes sense. Empathy is when you put the ladder into the hole, you climb down in the hole, and you put your arm around him. You say, this really sucks down here. And I'm so sorry that you're down here in this hole. I'm here with you. It's not the solution. How can I get you out of here? It's not the how do we get here? It's only I see you and I'm here with you. And that empathy, that ability to show empathy and provide empathy for team members as the world grows in complexity is the thing I think we need the most.
Beautiful. I like that a lot, actually. I think that makes a lot of sense with the challenges the world's facing, not just the engineering community.
Yeah.
Certainly.
We don't need more debate in the world. We need more dialogue.
Yeah, and more connection. Absolutely. Well, Travis, what question have I not asked you that you think would be really important to pass along to our listeners?
I hadn't thought of the motivation when you talked about someone that wants to grow their leadership journey. I hadn't thought about that in this conversation. It's really sitting with me how critical we you know, you asked earlier, how do I start my leadership journey? Well, I said introspection. And then we go to this next step of like, okay, I'm going to grow my ability, but I want to be a leader now. Well, then exploring my motivation. And so this isn't a question. It's more of a reflection on our conversation that continuing to be introspective as you grow your career, continuing to, it goes with that curiosity, hold on to it from the time you're a student to the time that you're ready to retire and beyond. That's something that continues to come up in my head right now. So I want to stress how much it's sat with me and how much that I want to embody that more and how I can improve in that. So that is front of mind. As far as the question goes, how has leadership changed the way that you show up at work?
I think it has led me to really focus on people more so. And I think in my own journey, again, being that doer and then getting promoted into a leadership position or a management position that I recognize to be, you know, really a leadership position to be focused on the staff that I manage. I've recognized over the years the importance of showing up and being there for people and how much that has changed the way I've approached things and not, you know, I think it's so easy to jump to conclusions and assumptions immediately. I think we even lead with that of like a guess in our head why things are the way they are and not always leading with curiosity of helping me understand. So I think doing more of that has really brought success to those individuals and just having me there or being there to support them instead of just managing the work. I think I've seen things go so much better in all aspects. I thought that was originally, you know, where I should be focused on is just let's manage the work, just work. And when I've stepped away with those individuals, the coffee and things like that, and like sat down and heard them and listened to their challenges both at work and outside of work to really see them and hear them, I think it's really changed the dynamic of the whole team.
Mm-hmm. I bet that makes you really proud.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Did you want to be a leader?
I thought I think that probably what a lot of people thought or think, I'm guessing with a bunch of people I've talked to, is like you should just always keep driving for management. You should just keep moving up the company. It comes with more pay and thus more responsibility. But I think a big piece that I recognize is it comes with more influence. And it's a big piece of leadership is if you have a lot of influence, you could really affect a lot of people's lives. And I think on a day-to-day basis, that's truly what you do. Most people spend really majority of their time at work, and with you, their manager or leader, and the influence you can have to someone's whole life, and seeing them in times of difficulty and not making their life harder when things aren't going well, and just being there for them. They show up back for you too,
Mm-hmm.
and the support goes both ways. But I think when you make their life more challenging, right? They say, "Hey, I really got to leave today. I have something important in my life," and you go, "Sorry, that project's just got to get out."
Yeah.
And I know you told me that earlier, but it doesn't matter. Why would they be excited to be there? Why would they want to show up if you don't understand and hear and support them just in their lives?
Yeah.
So I think that's what I've recognized.
That makes sense. It's bringing up a thought for me around the next challenge in career progression. We talked about how I found the change from technical doer to leader manager and the difference in skill set to be the most challenging time. And the next milestone that I think so many people experience is when you are a leader who values people and can lead from heart and not just from deadlines and deliverables. The challenge of managing team members with empathy and accountability becomes incredibly, incredibly difficult. And it's like so many times in my career, it's this pendulum where I learned about empathy. I learned about how to be a better leader and how to communicate. So then I lacked on accountability.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hold people accountable. I wanted to be empathic. I wanted to take care of them. So then, I was the other leader originally, deadlines, accountability, that's all that mattered. And so it's this pendulum where I've swung back and forth in my career. And so there is this need to think about, as you progress, how do you balance the ability to be a leader who values accountability, holds people accountable, and leads with empathy? And so I asked that question to you.
It's challenging.
Yeah.
It's very challenging. I think what I've recognized is building that trust with that individual is probably the first key of that, because it's definitely a pendulum of sometimes one's going to give more than the other way. And just having those open conversations of, I think maybe an easier dialogue here is like, someone that wants to not be at work, right? And you're like, okay, but it's kind of what I'm here to support you with. That's what we do, is we work and we make money. We're a business for a reason. And so I think that is a very difficult situation quite frequently. You're like, I see you, I'm here to support you. And I find that just having those open discussions of we have to make both sides work. And it's not, I've looked at it as it's not a challenge just for that one day, but more of a discussion from a long-term perspective. So both meeting them there and being reasonable, but asking for that same thing back.
Sure.
And I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Is that ask, or asking that how question, how can we still get this done? How can we, and have them help lead that solution, I think often can be really good rather than just telling people.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes sense. Another quote from Brene Brown that stands out in this conversation that's been really helpful for me is that clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And so that is where I focus so much on how can I get clear? Going back to the 3 C's, accountability has been something that I've been able to learn through that process of I got to get extra clear. I can't hold anybody accountable without that clarity. And then I can still come to it from a place of care when I've been clear about that. And hey, you're not performing. You're not meeting expectations. I care that you're successful. I really want you to be a part of this team. What do we got to do to get there? And so I have learned that is It's a challenging step. Having the difficult conversations to get to that place of clarity can be one of the most challenging, painful, anxiety-ridden experiences as a leader, but you're only harming yourself if you don't do that. I think you've got a good quote on this around being selfish.
Do I?
I think so. Yeah. It's actually selfish if you don't have difficult conversations because you're actually protecting yourself.
Yeah.
You're protecting, you're prioritizing your own comfort rather than the individual's needs of progressing and excelling.
Yeah.
So be okay with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. I also, early in my leadership journey, believed that I was a leader for the company I worked at, and that was the lens I looked through. And I wasn't a leader for that person as an individual, but in more of a business focus of that leader. And I don't know if that's exactly the best way to preface it, but the example would be that sometimes people aren't the right fit. And I think it's a leader's role to not only acknowledge that, but to support that and to assist that person in finding that next thing. And I always thought would be one of the bigger failures of my career as a leader is someone were to leave. But it's a very unrealistic expectation to put onto myself, of course, but just recognize to just support the person for who they are and what they're looking for in life. And, if they don't want to be here and, it's not going to play out well for really anybody, right? You're going to fight them and just keep pushing them harder, or maybe if you're not having those clear conversations, but once you find out that maybe this isn't the right fit, just be there to support them, has helped me mentally in those situations or in those thoughts of like, it's more important that I show up for them than I try to really make sure they stay here for me. Yeah. Right.
You're describing emotional maturity where you've gotten to a point where it's not about you. Leaders often act from a place of fear of what happens to my workload if this person's not here. Why can't they just do their job? But we can be much more, if we've gone through clear and concise multiple times, we've had this conversation and we've got to care and we've really investigated that maybe this isn't the right fit for them. Why not have a mindful transition? Why not say, I've got some other folks that you should network with and maybe you're a good fit with them. And most likely that relationship grows and blossoms to where future opportunities come from them. And there's no reason to have an adversarial relationship because a position didn't work out. People change in their life desires and their leadership styles and what happens at home that they need to make changes. And when we take that as a personal insult as a leader, it speaks to emotional maturity.
It's ego. It was what was speaking out there. Yeah, for sure. What are others going to think about me if someone leaves because they're not a good fit? What does that look like for me?
What would they think about you?
It turns out absolutely nothing. That's just how the world works. But I think we all live in our heads so much, and often don't communicate those things or understand or just be vulnerable. Right? I think that's such a big part of being human.
Yeah.
And if someone responds to you in a negative light when you're vulnerable, man, that shows so much more of them than you.
Yeah. It's really sound advice, and there's a circle of vulnerability that you need to understand. What level of vulnerability do I share with my team,
right?
With my clients, right? There's an oversharing process. That's I'm going to go tell my, my architect that I'm getting a divorce and I can't deliver on time. Maybe not the right way to start the conversation if you haven't already developed trust with them. So your advice is absolutely right. Vulnerability is lacking in our relationship development and our trust building exercises. I highly value it. And it can be damaging if people swing the pendulum too far and then overshare, and that makes people uncomfortable. So finding that circle of vulnerability that says, no, this is where I share that information.
Yeah.
Really important step.
Absolutely. Well, Travis, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for having me, Zach.